Legends say that in ancient times, when the worlds of gods and men were closely intertwined, there lived a warrior whose destiny was foretold by the heavens themselves. Around a crackling bonfire, casting strange shadows on the faces of those gathered, a skald began his tale of a hero whose name echoed through the halls of Valhalla. Hark, warriors, to the saga of Sigurd the Reborn, whose story is a defiance of death itself. On that fateful night, as a furious storm raged, Sigurd fell victim to betrayal. The blade plunged into his back marked not an end, but merely the beginning of his extraordinary journey. Awakening in the grim depths of Helheim, he found himself in a realm of shadows and despair, where souls wandered in eternal oblivion. But Sigurd, whose will was unyielding, could not accept his fate. Soon, through the chilling silence, he heard a call that led him to a black dragon chained in the very heart of the underworld. This ancient creature offered him a bargain, a chance to return to the world of the living, but at a high price. Sigurd, driven by a thirst for vengeance, accepted the offer. The dragon's fire, which awakened his body to life, transformed his very essence. Returning to the world, he was consumed by an insatiable craving for retribution, yet the dragon's shadow pursued him, demanding the promised payment. What would be the cost of this rebirth? Long before these events, when the northern winds carried legends of great kings and battles, Sigurd was born, son of Thor Ironshield and Astrid Keeper of Winds. His arrival was accompanied by thunder and lightning, as if the gods themselves welcomed his birth. The midwives, witnessing his first breath, whispered a prophecy: "This boy's destiny shall be forged from iron and blood." In Skygard, a village nestled between impassable mountains and a raging sea, Sigurd grew up among warriors and hunters. He quickly learned that strength without wisdom was like a useless weapon. Skygard was not just a settlement, but a symbol of resilience, where every inhabitant was a guardian of the unforgiving land. Winters tested their endurance, but those who survived became part of something greater, an unyielding people whose names would live on through the ages. The harsh conditions shaped Sigurd, teaching him to wield a sword before he could write. He was not merely a warrior, but a leader with a keen mind and an untiring heart. Sigurd became the protector of his people, a warrior whose name instilled hope in allies and fear in enemies. His axe, inherited from his father, was a symbol of his might and his word, as sharp as a blade. But in the shadow of greatness, envy always brews, and gazes filled with admiration soon began to covet his position. Sigurd became known not only as a resident of Skygard, but also as a warrior whose name thundered throughout the north. From a young age, he excelled on the battlefields, fighting alongside Nordgard's greatest warriors. His gaze, cold as mountain ice, struck terror into his enemies. He fought for honor, justice, and the memory of his ancestors. His body, covered in scars, was a chronicle of battles and victories. He belonged to an army known as the Wolves of Aegir, the most formidable force in Nordgard. Led by Jarl Ulrich, an ambitious and cunning man, the wolves swept across the lands like an unstoppable tide. Sigurd was the most powerful among them, respected and revered as a leader. His combat prowess became legendary. However, too bright a light in another's ranks can breed resentment. Ulrich, proud and suspicious, saw Sigurd as a threat. Sigurd's popularity grew, and skalds began to compose songs about him, praising him as a leader. The word king was heard more and more often, and this was enough to sow the seeds of betrayal. Ulrich decided to act to prevent losing his power. But betrayal always strikes from the shadows, awaiting the opportune moment. The day when perfidy overshadowed Sigurd's loyalty dawned under the leaden sky of Nordgard. Winter reigned supreme, and an icy wind pierced through the snow-laden pine forests. the warriors of Aegir, returning triumphantly from a campaign against the southern clans, were the cause of widespread rejoicing. Mead flowed freely from horns, bards sang of heroes' valor, and the fire's reflections danced on the walls of Ulrich's magnificent hall. Sigurd, as was his custom, kept to himself, preferring to observe rather than partake in the unrestrained revelry. He never let down his guard, even in times of peace. Yet that evening, the peaceful calm proved to be nothing more than an elaborate illusion woven by cunning hands. Ulrich had meticulously planned his scheme. He understood that an open confrontation with Sigurd would be suicide, for the warrior had long surpassed any fighter in his army. Thus, the betrayal came not with a drawn sword, but in the guise of cunning and deceit. During the feast, Ulrich rose and proposed a toast to Sigurd, extolling his bravery before the assembled company. Yet every word was imbued with false admiration. He presented him with a silver cup filled with mead, poisoned with a deadly venom. The golden liquid shimmered ominously in the torchlight, and Sigurd hesitated for a moment. Instinct screamed of danger, but all eyes in the hall were on him, and refusing the Jarl's toast would be seen as a grave insult. He raised the cup to his lips. The poison was not meant to kill instantly. Its purpose was to dull his senses, slow his reactions, and render the warrior vulnerable so he could offer no resistance when the hour of reckoning arrived. And that hour came. As the poison began to shackle his body, Sigurd felt the world around him distort. His vision blurred, his limbs weakened. At that moment, Ulrich's warriors, like jackals scenting a wounded lion, rushed forward. They surrounded him, drawing their swords. Sigurd tried to fight back, but his muscles refused to obey. The Jarl watched from afar, a self-satisfied smile on his face. The great warrior, who had inspired bards to compose songs and commanded universal admiration, now knelt, defenseless and helpless. Blows rained down from all sides. Blades tore flesh. Spears pierced armor. He let out a guttural roar, full not of pain but of fury, his spirit refusing to yield. But even the mightiest warriors are powerless against betrayal, and so, under the cold moonlight, Sigurd fell, unaware that his true journey was only just beginning. The cold of Helheim was all-pervasive, piercing not only the body, but also the bones, the soul, the very spirit of those who dwelled in that grim realm. Sigurd lost track of time in that dark place. It had lost its usual linearity. Opening his eyes after death, he saw only a thick, icy fog, swaying like silent specters. The ground was made of slick black stone, covered with a thin layer of cracked ice. The sky, if it could be called that, was a gray-green expanse, devoid of sun, moon, and stars. Only a dim light seemed to hover between being and non-being. Sigurd wandered aimlessly through Helheim, time seemingly frozen for him. He walked among bent figures, souls muttering meaningless words, condemned to eternal wandering through the underworld. Some cast a glance at him, but their eyes were empty, dead from centuries or millennia spent in this place. Among them were warriors, men and women who, like him, had fallen in battle. But if Valhalla was for heroes, Helheim was the domain of the forgotten. Sigurd could not accept this. His death was not heroic. It was not a death worthy of a warrior. The icy wind howled like a hungry wolf, burning his skin and tearing at his flesh with invisible teeth. He stumbled, his bare feet dragging across the sharp ground, where brittle bones crunched under each step. Rivers of dark ice cut through the landscape, and beneath their surface, shadows were visible, as if trying to break free. Dry, gnarled trees emerged from nowhere, their roots like claws digging into the frozen earth. Sometimes one of them whispered his name, as if the underworld itself mocked his presence. He let out a cry, a roar of rage, pain, and anger, but the sound was swallowed by the silent abyss. No one listened, or rather, someone listened, but they did not care. Hell, The mistress of this realm was not like Odin or Thor, who walked shoulder to shoulder with their warriors. She was a distant shadow, a presence that permeated everything but offered no answers. Inside Sigurd, indignation grew. He knelt in the black snow, clenched his fists, and furiously struck the ground. "This cannot be my fate," he roared, his voice echoing in the void. "My blood was spilled due to betrayal. I should not be here." But Helheim did not answer, only silence and cold enveloped him. Then, suddenly, something changed. Ahead, beyond the creeping shadows and hopeless souls, Sigurd noticed something unusual, a dark fissure, a cavernous maw carved into a mountain of ice and black rock. The air there seemed to vibrate with a strange warmth, something that clearly did not belong in this world of eternal cold. He rose, overcoming the resistance of his muscles, and headed toward the ominous darkness of the cave. If Helheim would not give him a way out, he would find it himself. Sigurd stepped into the ominous maw of the cave, where impenetrable darkness instantly enveloped his vision. A heavy, stagnant heat emanating from the depths washed over him, creating a painful contrast to the chilling cold of Helheim. Stepping carefully, he heard the echo of his footsteps multiply and fracture against the uneven rock walls. Ahead, a ghostly light flickered, dim and weak, as if the very air was saturated with energy. An unfamiliar scent filled Sigurd's nostrils, a pungent mixture of sulfur and something primal, as if eternity itself had left its imprint here. The cave seemed to breathe, a living energy pulsating in every corner, making the warrior feel as if he were on the boundary of worlds. The cave walls were etched with runes, ancient symbols of incredible power that began to glow with a golden light as Sigurd approached. With each step, he delved deeper into the veil of mystery, realizing that this was not just a refuge, but a mysterious portal, a bridge between Helheim and other unknown worlds. Soon, the cave expanded, forming a vast chamber, bottomless and boundless, like the underworld itself. And there, in the very center of this grim sanctuary, sat the dragon. It seemed not merely a creature of flesh and blood, but an entity transcending the limits of time and space. Its scales were as black as the darkness that enveloped the cave. The dragon was engulfed in flames, but this was no ordinary fire. It shimmered with shades of green and blue, as if reflecting the souls that had passed through its crucible. Sigurd felt a tremor, but it was not fear, rather a deep recognition, as if his consciousness had already imprinted this image even before entering the cave. The dragon did not look at him, but the warrior knew his presence had not gone unnoticed. The silence was oppressive, but the power emanating from this creature was so immense that the absence of words became an unbearable burden. Sigurd felt the cave walls watching him, awaiting his answer. Suddenly, a deep, thundering voice filled the cave, like distant peals of thunder. This was not ordinary speech, but an impression that penetrated directly into Sigurd's mind. "Sigurd, warrior, seeking vengeance," the dragon spoke, its words echoing off the walls. "You did not come here by chance. You are not the first, nor the last. Many have tried to break free from the chains of Helheim, but all have failed. What distinguishes you from them?" Sigurd fixed his gaze on the dragon, his eyes glued to the dancing flames. He could not deny the power emanating from this ancient creature, which seemed to exist outside of time. The dragon was not merely a beast, but something far greater, more ancient, permeating the boundaries of worlds. "I was betrayed," Sigurd replied firmly, his voice sounding stronger than he expected. "Death is not the end for a warrior. The battle is not yet over. I seek to return to the world of the living to exact my revenge, to restore justice." The dragon bowed its head, as if pondering his words. For a moment, Sigurd felt as if he were being judged, but then the dragon spoke again, its voice imbued with ominous, seductive notes. I can grant you what you desire. I can return you to the world of the living. I can make your vengeance a reality." Sigurd stepped forward, intoxicated by the promise of returning to the familiar world, his heart beating faster. But the dragon was in no hurry. It continued, its voice filled with a gravity that seemed to emanate from everywhere at once. "But there will be a price. Nothing is given for free. To return, you must surrender something worth more than any gold or power you possessed in life. You must surrender your heart." Sigurd froze, trying to grasp the meaning of these words. His heart. It was what defined him as a warrior, as a man, as a living being. What would be left of Sigurd without it? It was an unthinkable sacrifice, incomprehensible to the mind. A sudden pain pierced his chest, as if the very emptiness of Helheim had permeated his soul. But he did not hesitate. Vengeance boiled in his veins, a flame that burned brighter than anything he had ever experienced. "I need nothing more than vengeance. What is a heart compared to that?" Sigurd declared, his decision finally solidified in his mind. "I agree." The dragon grinned, as much as such a formidable creature could. "Then so be it. I grant you the power to return, but remember, Sigurd, once you surrender your heart, you will be forever bound to me. You will become mine and I, yours. Your actions in the world of the living will be a reflection of what you have lost. Your destiny will be intertwined with mine." Sigurd nodded, driven not by fear, but by fierce determination. He understood there was no turning back. His path of vengeance had begun, and nothing, not even death itself, could stop him. The dragon extended its massive claws and touched Sigurd's chest. At that moment, the warrior felt an unbearable pain, as if he were being torn apart. When the dragon's claws withdrew, Sigurd was no longer the same. His heart had been torn out, but his soul burned brighter than ever. He was ready to return and exact justice. His fate ceased to be that of a simple warrior and transformed into the destiny of a man who had embraced darkness in his heart in exchange for what he desired most. The dragon, now the guardian of his spirit, whispered into his mind, "Go now. The world of the living awaits you. But remember, warrior, vengeance is a path of no return." Sigurd, consumed by the fury of 1,000 battles, prepared to leave Helheim, ready to pay any price for one goal: revenge. Sigurd emerged from the grim depths of the underworld, like a shadow cast by a nightmare. The world of men, Midgard, appeared to him in a new light, disarmingly simple and ordinary compared to the colossal power that churned within his being. The celestial vault, once grey and distant, now seemed closer, almost tangible, yet at the same time burdened by an ominous haze that refused to dissipate. It was as if nature itself held its breath, anticipating the consequences of his return. Sigurd's outward appearance had undergone irreversible metamorphoses. His body, still strong and muscular as in life, now exuded a denser, almost incomprehensible weight. His skin had acquired a deathly pale hue, as if he balanced precariously between life and death. On his chest, the mark of the dragon's pact gaped, a deep, pulsating scar spewing dark energy. It seemed to live its own sinister life, a constant reminder of the monstrous price paid for his return. Beneath his skin, a network of black and blue veins surfaced, as if not blood, but deadly venom circulated through them. But the most striking changes affected his eyes. They had transformed into bottomless wells, holding the burden of an existence that transcended death itself. No longer did the fire of life glimmer within them, only an icy, merciless focus. Sigurd's gaze penetrated all barriers, exposing the deepest secrets of the soul, as if nothing could hide from his all-seeing eye. His strength had reached unprecedented proportions. With each step, the earth seemed to tremble, yielding to his monstrous power. Past battles paled in comparison to the might he now possessed. Every muscle in his body pulsed with pure, inhuman energy. He had not merely grown stronger, he had transformed. It seemed he could uproot trees with his bare hands, crush stones to dust with a mere act of will. His agility also reached unimaginable heights. He moved with the speed of a shadow, almost imperceptibly, as if darkness itself enveloped him. Sigurd's sharpened senses allowed him to hear the rustle of a falling leaf from miles away, to perceive the slightest fluctuations in the air, as if he had merged with the surrounding world into a single entity. He could detect subtle movements, the faintest sense. But most astonishing was his inseparable connection with the dragon, still burning within his soul. He felt the presence of a monstrous force in every cell of his body, and at the same time heard the whisper of a voice sounding in his mind. At times, it seemed the dragon relentlessly watched his every move, testing his resolve. And finally, Sigurd was tormented by an insatiable hunger, a thirst that could not be quenched. He did not know if it was an overwhelming drive for vengeance or something else awakened in his soul, but he understood that he could not stop until his mission was complete. The thirst for retribution was firmly rooted in his being, becoming an indispensable part of him. And although he possessed the power to destroy everything around him, he understood that he must exercise patience. He needed something more, the right opportunity, the perfect stage for the execution of his vengeance. Sigurd surveyed the surroundings of Midgard, both familiar and alien. He felt a connection to this land, to the winds that swept through the forests, to the ocean waves crashing against the cliffs. But this was not enough. The only thing that mattered was the death of those who had betrayed him, and for that, he needed not only brute force, but also a meticulously crafted plan. He had to act slowly and methodically, approaching his goals step by step. Many obstacles would arise on his path, and to achieve what he desired, he had to show cunning, calculation, and wait for the opportune moment to strike. Sigurd approached the Jarl's village boundary, but not so close as to be noticed. He needed to sense the presence of his former comrades. The village seemed serene, as if nothing had happened, as if time had stood still. But for him, time had stopped. His life, his emotions, his very destiny, everything was inextricably linked to this moment. Nothing mattered but revenge. Crouching low, Sigurd touched the earth with a firm hand. He felt the vibrations of the ground, the movements within the village, the heartbeats of its inhabitants. He knew he could destroy everything around him at any moment, but he held back. His goal had not yet been achieved. He watched the village with a piercing gaze, analyzing every movement, every breath, waiting for the opportune moment. He knew his vengeance was inevitable, but patience was his greatest ally. The time spent observing and preparing would make his strike even more devastating. And so he waited at the village threshold, anticipating the moment when his revenge would finally become a reality. For now, he remained in the shadows, biding his time. The inner fire burning in his chest would not extinguish until his enemies drew their last breath. But he knew the time to strike had not yet come. In the heart of Midgard, amidst the boundless rural expanses, lay the quiet and peaceful village of Nim. Its muddy streets were lined with wooden and stone houses, and the appetizing aroma of supper still lingered in the air. Nothing portended the approaching death, like a merciless storm. From the shadows, Sigurd approached, his movements precise and powerful, like a predator stalking its prey. He had ceased to be human in the conventional sense, transforming into a being surpassing mortal limitations. Each of his steps made the earth tremble, as if nature itself was his ally. He was no longer just a warrior fallen in battle, but had become the embodiment of destruction, an inexorable force of nature. Ascending the hills surrounding the village, Sigurd acutely listened for the slightest signs of life within the settlement. His heightened senses picked up the whispers of ages, the conversations of gods in distant towers, and the heartbeats of the inhabitants. But above all was the Jarl's presence. Sigurd felt his former leader, wherever he might be. The Jarl stood in the center of the village, surrounded by those who still considered themselves his warriors. However, Sigurd knew that the chieftain before him was no longer the one he remembered. A void gaped in his soul, which the warrior's death had filled with an insatiable thirst for vengeance. The wind piercing the night was deadly quiet, like a silent harbinger of impending doom. Sigurd took up a position at the village entrance, peering into the impenetrable darkness. He knew he had to act swiftly, lethally, and mercilessly. His eyes flashed with an unearthly light, and he moved forward like a shadow. With superhuman agility, he glided through the village streets, avoiding patrols. His steps were silent and swift, like a phantom returned to the scene of his revenge. Finally, reaching the center of the village where the Jarl stood, Sigurd paused for a moment, his gaze fixed on the place where it all began, where he had been betrayed. The Jarl, seated on his stone throne, appeared unperturbed, surrounded by several warriors. Sigurd heard their carefree laughter, as if nothing had happened. They did not suspect that death had returned, that the very winter of Helheim had come for their souls. Like an explosion of strength and fury, Sigurd burst into the center of the square. The first guard tried to raise his sword, but was too late. Sigurd attacked with lightning speed, throwing the warrior back. The guard's sword broke in half, and his body slumped lifelessly to the ground. The sound of the fall echoed across the deserted square. The Jarl sprang to his feet, his face contorted with a mixture of disbelief and rage. He immediately recognized the figure looming over him, a shadow from the past, the man he had betrayed, now returned from the dead. Fear instantly gripped him. Sigurd moved forward, and the battle began. In a desperate attempt to defend himself, the Jarl drew his weapon, a broad battle axe gleaming in the moonlight. But Sigurd was no longer an ordinary mortal. His blows were swift and unstoppable. Like a storm, each movement a wave of relentless destruction. With a cry of rage, the Jarl charged, his axe slicing through the air with force. But Sigurd dodged with supernatural agility, as if he knew the Jarl's every move beforehand. Gathering inhuman strength, Sigurd delivered a blow that knocked the axe from the Jarl's hands, sending it flying far away. The Jarl recoiled, stunned by his enemy's power, but only for a moment. Sigurd gave him no respite. With one fluid motion, he lunged forward and plunged his sword into the Jarl's ribs. The Jarl staggered, trying to remain on his feet, but pain had already enveloped his body. The Jarl's warriors rushed to their leader's defense, but Sigurd annihilated them one by one. He moved among them like a furious shadow, his sword hacking, crushing, and breaking everything in its path. Every blow was a death sentence. The sound of clashing swords and falling bodies echoed through the area, like a symphony of destruction. None of the Jarl's warriors stood a chance. Sigurd was beyond death, beyond pain, beyond fear. Only hatred drove him, making him unstoppable. Finally, only Sigurd and the Jarl remained on the battlefield. The leader, disarmed and bleeding, crawled deeper into the square. He understood that his death was inevitable, but he still tried to stand and grasp a nearby spear. But Sigurd gave him no chance. He calmly approached, watching the Jarl with a cold gaze, as if observing a creature that had fulfilled its purpose and was now doomed to perish. With a final strike, Sigurd slit the Jarl's throat, and blood spurted onto the ground. The man who was once a powerful leader was dead, his last breath dissolving into the darkness. Sigurd stood over the Jarl's body, witnessing his demise. Vengeance was complete, and the echo of justice resounded through time. He felt satisfaction, yet at the same time a tension grew within him. The price of his revenge still haunted him, and the promise made to the Dragon in Helheim lay heavily on his shoulders. He turned and left the village, moving with the same speed and precision with which he had arrived. In the distance, he heard the sounds of destruction and the moans of those who had survived his wrath. Sigurd had fulfilled his promise, but he felt that his journey was far from over. Fate called him back to Helheim to find the dragon and fulfill the last part of his pact. He knew that the true cost of his revenge was yet to come, and that the real pain was only just beginning. Sigurd once again plunged into the enveloping darkness, feeling a heaviness in his soul and a dimming of his mind. The dragon, like an inexorable shadow, awaited its hour to claim what was due. Sigurd, having satisfied his thirst for revenge, returned to Helheim, bearing the burden of retribution accomplished, his steps heavy, his gaze grim. The dragon awaited him, its colossal figure shimmering in the spectral light. The price paid for the journey became evident. Sigurd's soul was forever bound to this ancient and powerful creature, capable of moving between worlds. Now, Sigurd was forever the dragon's servant, an eternal warrior condemned to exist in the darkness he had so desperately sought. The dragon fixed its gaze upon him, an abyss reflected in its eyes, and uttered words that echoed throughout Helheim. "You sought vengeance, warrior, but in your blindness you lost something irreplaceable." Sigurd's soul, already wounded and desolate, finally dissolved into shadow, becoming an instrument of a larger destiny that he himself had chosen. Vengeance had been achieved, but its cost was immeasurably high. Instead of the expected joy, he found only deep solitude, an empty echo of his own aspirations. Retribution did not bring the peace he had hoped for. The narrative drew to a close. The skald, having finished his tale, gazed at the bonfire's flames, their reflections dancing on the surrounding shadows. He picked up a dry branch and, with a single motion, extinguished the fire. The flames died, leaving behind only ash and the cold of the night. "Let each choose their own path," the skald whispered. "But remember, not all vengeance brings long-awaited peace." With these words, he walked away from the dying fire, leaving behind memories of the past as darkness once again enveloped everything.